The attic air hung thick and dusty, motes dancing in the single shaft of sunlight piercing through a crack in the boarded-up window. John coughed, waving a hand in front of his face, the scent of forgotten things and dried wood assaulting his nostrils. He hadn't been up here in years, not since they moved in, really. Emily, ever the minimalist, had declared the attic a no-go zone, a place for cobwebs and ghosts of previous owners. But today, a leak sprung in the roof above their bedroom, a slow, persistent drip that was driving him mad, and the repairman had suggested checking the attic for any obvious damage. He navigated through the clutter, boxes stacked precariously, forgotten holiday decorations, and furniture shrouded in white sheets like spectral figures. The floorboards creaked under his weight, each step a small explosion of dust. He found the area above their bedroom, the source of the leak clearly visible. A dark, damp patch on the underside of the roof. Nothing he could fix himself, he'd have to call a roofer. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Tucked away in a shadowed corner, behind a stack of old photo albums and beneath a moth-eaten tapestry, was a small wooden box. It wasn't ornate, just plain, unvarnished wood, the kind you might find in a craft store. Curiosity piqued. He pulled it out, brushing off a thick layer of dust. It was surprisingly light. He lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were letters. Dozens of them, tied together with a faded ribbon, the paper yellowed with age. His heart gave a strange little thump. Letters? Who would be writing letters in this day and age? And why were they hidden in the attic? He picked up the top letter, his fingers brushing against the brittle paper. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, looping, and elegant. It wasn't Emily's. He knew Emily's handwriting, sharp and efficient, like her personality, organized, practical, always in control. This handwriting was different, softer, more romantic. His brow furrowed. He untied the ribbon, his fingers trembling slightly, and unfolded the top letter. The paper crackled softly in the silence of the attic. His eyes scanned the words, his breath catching in his throat. "My dearest," it began. Not his name. A different name. A name he didn't recognize. A cold dread began to seep into his bones. He read on, the elegant script blurring slightly as his eyes darted across the page. The words were filled with longing, affection, intimacy. They spoke of shared moments, secret jokes, stolen kisses. They were love letters, passionate, heartfelt love letters, and they weren't addressed to him. He felt a strange disconnect, as if he were reading someone else's mail, intruding on a private world. But the name at the top, the unfamiliar name, it gnawed at him. Who was this woman writing to? And why were these letters hidden in their attic? He flipped through the other letters, his hands shaking now. They were all addressed to the same unknown man, all written in the same elegant hand, all filled with the same passionate declarations of love. Each letter was dated. He scanned the dates. They spanned years, years. And then he saw a date that made his blood run cold. A date from just a few months before he met Emily. He sank back onto a dusty trunk, the letters spilling from his hands, scattering onto the attic floor like fallen leaves. A wave of nausea washed over him. He felt dizzy, disoriented, as if the floor beneath him had suddenly tilted. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it, trying to deny what his eyes were telling him. Emily? His Emily? The woman he loved? The woman he thought he knew? The woman he had built his life with? Could she be connected to these letters? It was impossible. It had to be. Emily was perfect. Organized, efficient, yes, but also kind, loving, supportive. She was his rock, his anchor, the calm in his chaotic life. They had built a life together, a good life, a happy life, or so he thought. The letters mocked him from the dusty floor. My dearest. The words echoed in his mind, a chilling counterpoint to the life he believed he knew. He picked up another letter, his fingers trembling. He had to know. He had to understand. He forced himself to read, his eyes scanning the words, searching for clues, for answers. The woman in the letters, whoever she was deeply in love with this unknown man. She wrote of missing him, of longing to be with him, of dreams of their future together. She wrote of passion, of desire, of a love that burned bright and fierce. It was intoxicating, reading these intimate words, even though they weren't meant for him. But beneath the intoxication, a cold, hard knot of fear was tightening in his stomach. What if these letters were Emily's? What if the perfect wife he thought he knew was a carefully constructed facade? He stood up abruptly, scattering more dust, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to get out of the attic. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, surrounded by these ghosts of a past he didn't understand. He gathered the letters, stuffing them back into the wooden box, tying the faded ribbon around them with shaking hands. He placed the box back in its hidden corner, behind the photo albums and the tapestry, as if trying to bury the truth along with it. He climbed down the attic stairs, his legs feeling heavy and leaden. He emerged into the cool, quiet house, blinking in the dim light. Emily was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The smell of roasting chicken filled the air, a comforting, domestic scent. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, ordinary, but nothing was normal anymore. Not for him. The letters had changed everything. He looked at Emily, at her familiar silhouette in the kitchen doorway, and a wave of doubt, sharp and cold, washed over him. Was she really the woman he thought she was? Or had he been living a lie all these years? The aroma of roasted chicken, usually a comforting beacon in their home, now felt cloying, almost suffocating. John watched Emily move around the kitchen, her movements graceful and efficient, the way they always were. She chopped vegetables with practiced ease, her brow furrowed in concentration. He had always admired her focus, her ability to handle everything with such calm competence. But now, a seed of suspicion had been planted in his mind, and it was starting to sprout, twisting and turning into a thorny vine of doubt. He saw her in a new light, or perhaps he was finally seeing her as she truly was. He noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness around her mouth, things he had never paid attention to before, or perhaps had chosen to ignore. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. Emily turned, a bright, welcoming smile lighting up her face. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "Leak okay?" Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, he noticed. Or was he imagining it? Was he projecting his newfound suspicion onto her innocent expression? "Yeah, leaks up there," he mumbled, gesturing vaguely towards the ceiling. "Nothing I can fix. Gonna have to call someone." He watched her closely, searching for any flicker of guilt, any sign of deception in her eyes. But her gaze was clear, open, seemingly guileless. "Okay," she said, turning back to her chopping. "Dinner will be ready in about half an hour. Why don't you relax in the living room?" He couldn't relax. Relaxation felt impossible, a luxury he could no longer afford. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and half-formed accusations. He wandered into the living room, pacing restlessly, his gaze darting around the familiar space. Everything in their home was meticulously arranged. perfectly in its place, a reflection of Emily's organized nature. Their life together was like this living room, comfortable, well-ordered, seemingly flawless. But now he knew, or at least suspected, that beneath the surface of perfection, something was rotten, something was hidden. The letters. They were the crack in the facade, the first sign of decay in their seemingly perfect world. He couldn't shake the image of the letters from his mind. My dearest. The words haunted him, echoing in the silence of the living room. Who was this dearest? And why were these letters filled with such passionate declarations of love, hidden in their attic? The dates on the letters were crucial. They spanned years, but some were recent, disturbingly recent. And the one from just before they met, that one chilled him to the bone. Could Emily have been in love with someone else when they met? Could she have been carrying on an affair even before they were married? The thought was like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands, feeling a wave of despair wash over him. He had always thought of Emily as his soulmate, his perfect match. They had met at a friend's wedding, a classic meet-cute, and he had been instantly smitten. She was beautiful, intelligent, witty, and she seemed genuinely interested in him. Their courtship was a whirlwind romance, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and a deep, undeniable connection. He had proposed after just 6 months, and she had said yes without hesitation. Their wedding was a beautiful affair, everything he had ever dreamed of. And their marriage? Well, he thought it was good, solid, happy. They had their routines, their comfortable silences, their shared jokes. They rarely argued. They always supported each other. They were a team. Or so he believed. But now, the letters cast a long, dark shadow over everything he thought he knew. He replayed their relationship in his mind, searching for clues, for signs he had missed, for moments that now seemed to take on a different meaning. Had there been times when Emily seemed distant, preoccupied? Had there been secrets, hidden phone calls, unexplained absences? He struggled to remember, his mind clouded by confusion and disbelief. He wanted to believe that it was all a mistake, that the letters were someone else's, that he had somehow misunderstood everything. But deep down, a cold, hard voice whispered in his ear, telling him that the truth was far more sinister, far more painful. Emily called him to dinner, her voice cheerful, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside him. He forced a smile, trying to appear normal, trying to hide the storm brewing beneath the surface. He joined her at the dining table, the roasted chicken and mashed potatoes laid out before them, a picture of domestic bliss. But the food tasted like ash in his mouth. He picked at his plate, his appetite gone, his mind consumed by the letters. Emily chatted about her day, about work, about errands she had run, her voice a soothing background hum. He nodded and murmured responses, his thoughts miles away, trapped in the dusty attic surrounded by the ghosts of Emily's past. He had to know the truth. He couldn't live with this uncertainty, this gnawing suspicion, eating away at him from the inside. He had to confront Emily. But how? What would he say? "Honey, I found some love letters in the attic. Are they yours?" The words sounded ridiculous, absurd, like something out of a bad soap opera. He needed a plan, a strategy. He couldn't just blurt it out, not yet. He needed to gather more information, to understand the context of the letters, to prepare himself for whatever truth they might reveal. He decided to play it cool, to observe Emily, to look for clues, for inconsistencies in her story. He would watch her, listen to her, analyze her every word and gesture. He would become a detective in his own life, searching for the truth hidden beneath the surface of his seemingly perfect marriage. And he would start tonight. As they finished dinner, Emily suggested watching a movie. "Something light," she said, smiling at him. "We both need to relax." Relax. The word felt like a cruel joke. He agreed, forcing another smile, his mind already racing, plotting his next move. They settled on the sofa, the television flickering to life, filling the room with artificial light and sound. Emily leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand reaching for his. He felt her warmth, her familiar touch, and a wave of conflicting emotions washed over him. Love, confusion, suspicion, hurt. He wanted to pull away, to recoil from her touch. But he forced himself to remain still, to play the role of the loving husband, the unsuspecting fool. He would play her game for now. He would wait, and he would watch. And he would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. He owed himself that much. He owed himself the truth. The movie flickered on the screen, a romantic comedy, ironically. Emily laughed at the jokes, her hand still resting in his. He forced himself to smile, to nod, to pretend to be engaged. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying the images of the letters, the elegant handwriting, the passionate words. He glanced at Emily, studying her profile in the dim light of the television screen. She looked serene, peaceful, completely unaware of the turmoil raging inside him. Was it an act? Was she really that good at hiding her secrets? Or was he completely wrong? Was he reading too much into a box of old letters? Doubt gnawed at him again, a persistent, insidious whisper. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe the letters were old, from a past relationship, something she had long since moved on from. Maybe he was making a mountain out of a molehill. But then the image of the date flashed through his mind, the date just before they met. That date was the key, the piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. It couldn't be explained away as a past relationship. It was too close, too recent. And the passion in the letters, the raw emotion, it felt too real, too current to be just a faded memory. He shifted slightly, moving his hand away from Emily's, feigning discomfort. "Just need to stretch," he mumbled, getting up from the sofa. He walked over to the window, staring out into the darkness, his back to Emily. He needed space, air, a moment to think, to breathe. He could feel her eyes on him, questioning, curious. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked, her voice soft, concerned. "Yeah, fine," he said, his voice tight, strained. "Just thinking about the leak. Gonna have to call someone tomorrow." He turned back to face her, forcing a casual smile. "Long day." She nodded, her eyes still searching his face. "Yeah, me too," she said, her voice a little quieter now. "Tired." She yawned, stretching languidly. "Maybe we should just call it a night." It was exactly what he wanted. He needed to be alone, to process everything, to plan his next move. "Sounds good," he said, managing a genuine smile this time. "Early start tomorrow." They turned off the television, the room plunging into silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. They went upstairs to bed, the familiar routine feeling strange, almost surreal. They brushed their teeth in silence, the mundane act feeling loaded with unspoken tension. They got into bed, the space between them feeling vast and empty, even though they were physically close. Emily turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. "Good night, honey," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the darkness. "Good night," he replied, his voice flat, emotionless. He lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, his mind racing, his heart pounding. Emily's breathing slowed beside him, evening out into the steady rhythm of sleep. Or was she pretending? Was she really asleep, or was she lying awake just like him, consumed by her own secrets, her own lies? He waited until he was sure she was asleep, listening intently to her breathing, his senses on high alert. When he was certain, he carefully, silently, slipped out of bed. He tiptoed out of the bedroom, closing the door behind him with exaggerated care. He crept downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest, his movements stealthy, almost conspiratorial. He went into the living room, his eyes scanning the familiar space. He needed to find something, anything, that could shed more light on the letters, on Emily's past, on the truth of their marriage. He started with her purse, which was usually tossed carelessly on the armchair. He hesitated for a moment, a pang of guilt twisting in his gut. Was he really going to do this? Snoop through his wife's purse? It felt wrong, invasive, a violation of trust. But the letters justified it, he told himself. He had to know the truth. He opened her purse, his fingers trembling slightly. He rummaged through the contents: wallet, keys, phone, lipstick, tissues. Nothing unusual, nothing incriminating. He felt a surge of disappointment mixed with a strange sense of relief. Maybe he was wrong after all. Maybe he was just being paranoid. But then, he saw it, tucked away in a small zippered compartment, almost hidden from view. A small leather-bound notebook. His heart skipped a beat. A diary? He pulled it out, his fingers closing around the soft leather. It was small, discreet, the kind of notebook someone might use to jot down private thoughts, secret feelings. His hands trembled as he opened it, his eyes scanning the first page. The handwriting was familiar, Emily's, but different, softer, more flowing, almost identical to the handwriting in the letters. His breath caught in his throat. He started to read. The diary entries were dated, starting from years ago and continuing up to just a few weeks ago. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the words, searching for answers. He read about Emily's childhood, her teenage years, her college experiences. He learned about her dreams, her fears, her insecurities. He saw a side of Emily he had never known, a vulnerable, introspective side hidden beneath her confident exterior. And then he found it. An entry from years ago, dated just before they met. His heart pounded in his chest as he read the words. She wrote about meeting someone special, someone who had swept her off her feet. She wrote about falling in love, deeply, passionately, irrevocably. She wrote about him as A, just the initial, A. The same initial as the name on the letters. His blood ran cold. He read on, his eyes devouring the words, his mind reeling. Emily's diary entries confirmed his worst fears. She had been deeply in love with someone else, someone named A, just before they met. Their relationship had been intense, passionate, all-consuming. But then, something had happened. The diary entries became darker, more melancholic. She wrote about heartbreak, about loss, about a devastating breakup. She wrote about A leaving, moving away, disappearing from her life. The pain in her words was palpable, raw, visceral. He could feel her anguish, her despair, as if it were his own. And then the entries stopped abruptly for a period of several months. And when they resumed, the tone was different, more subdued, more resigned. She wrote about moving on, about trying to heal, about starting a new chapter in her life. And then she wrote about meeting him. John. He read the entries about their first meeting, their courtship, their wedding. They were polite, cordial, even affectionate, in a detached, almost clinical way. There was no passion, no fire, no deep emotional connection in her words. She described him as kind, stable, reliable. She wrote about appreciating his good qualities, about enjoying his company. But there was no love. Not the kind of love she had written about for A. Not the kind of love he thought they shared. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He had been a fool. A blind, naive fool. He had mistaken Emily's politeness for love, her stability for passion, her reliability for devotion. He had built his entire life on a lie. Their marriage was a sham, a carefully constructed performance, based not on love, but on what? Comfort? Convenience? A desperate attempt to escape the pain of her past? He closed the diary, his hands shaking, his heart aching with a pain he had never known before. He had the truth now, the cold, hard, devastating truth. Emily had never loved him. She had married him on the rebound, using him to fill the void left by A. He was a substitute, a stand-in, a pale imitation of the man she had truly loved. And the letters. The letters were a testament to that lost love, a secret shrine to the man who still held her heart, even after all these years. He understood now why the letters were hidden in the attic. They were Emily's secret, her hidden treasure, a reminder of a love that was lost, but never forgotten. And he, John, was just a footnote in her story, a supporting character in a drama that was never really about him. He put the diary back in Emily's purse, his movements slow, deliberate, his mind numb with shock and grief. He returned to bed, slipping back under the covers, his body cold, his soul aching. He lay there, in the darkness, staring up at the ceiling, the truth weighing down on him like a physical burden. He could hear Emily's soft breathing beside him, the sound now grating on his nerves, filled with deception and betrayal. He closed his eyes, tears welling up, blurring his vision. He had thought she was the perfect wife, until he found the hidden letters. And now, his perfect world had shattered into a million pieces, leaving him alone in the darkness, with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and the crushing weight of a love that was never real. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that his life would never be the same again. The truth had been revealed, and the consequences were about to unfold. Sleep was impossible. John lay in bed, rigid and tense, the events of the night replaying in his mind like a broken record. The letters, the diary, Emily's secret past, his own naive blindness. It all swirled together in a chaotic vortex of pain and confusion. He watched the first rays of dawn creep through the curtains, painting the room in a pale, grey light. Emily stirred beside him, stretching languidly, her movements graceful and unhurried. She turned to him, her eyes still heavy with sleep, a soft smile gracing her lips. "Morning, sleepyhead," she murmured, her voice warm and affectionate. The warmth felt like a lie, the affection a carefully crafted performance. He forced a smile back, his heart aching with a fresh wave of betrayal. He had to confront her. He couldn't live like this, pretending everything was normal while the truth festered between them like a poisonous wound. He waited until they were downstairs having breakfast, the mundane routine feeling surreal and strained. Emily chatted about her plans for the day, oblivious to the storm brewing within him. He listened in silence, his gaze fixed on his coffee cup, his mind racing, searching for the right words, the right moment. He had to be careful. He didn't want to explode, to lash out in anger. He wanted to be calm, collected, in control. He wanted to understand, to get answers, to confront Emily with the truth, and to see her reaction. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, and looked up at her. "Emily," he said, his voice quiet but firm. She stopped talking, her eyes meeting his, a flicker of curiosity in their depths. "Yes," she said, her voice still cheerful, unsuspecting. I went up to the attic yesterday," he began, his voice trembling slightly. He watched her face closely, searching for any reaction, any sign of guilt or apprehension. Her expression remained neutral, her eyes still curious, but now with a hint of concern. "Oh," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Find anything interesting?" Her casual tone, her seeming innocence, infuriated him. Was she really that oblivious? Or was she just playing dumb? "Yeah," he said, his voice hardening. "I found something. A box, hidden behind some old photo albums." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, watching her reaction. Her smile faltered slightly, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. A flicker of something, a shadow of unease, crossed her face. He had her attention now. "A box," she repeated, her voice a little less cheerful now, a little more guarded. "What kind of box?" He held her gaze, his eyes unwavering, searching for the truth. "A wooden box," he said slowly, deliberately, with letters in it. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. He watched her face, waiting for the penny to drop, waiting for the truth to dawn in her eyes. And then he saw it. The color drained from her face, her eyes widened in shock, her breath catching in her throat. The mask of innocence slipped, revealing the fear, the guilt, the panic hidden beneath. She knew exactly what he was talking about. The letters, her secret, hidden letters. The truth was out. The confrontation had begun. Silence hung heavy in the air, thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Emily stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup, her knuckles white against the porcelain. She took a shaky sip, her gaze darting away from his, avoiding his eyes. "Letters," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "What? What letters?" Her denial was weak, unconvincing, a pathetic attempt to cling to the remnants of her carefully constructed lie. He knew she was lying. He had seen the truth in her eyes, the flash of panic, the sudden pallor of her skin. He wasn't going to let her off the hook, not this time. He leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Don't play games, Emily," he said, his words sharp, cutting through the silence. "You know exactly what letters I'm talking about. The letters in the wooden box, the letters hidden in the attic." Her eyes flickered back to his, filled with a desperate plea, a silent cry for help. He saw the fear in them, the vulnerability, the raw emotion she had kept hidden for so long. But beneath the vulnerability, he also saw the deception, the years of lies, the betrayal of his trust. He couldn't let himself be swayed by her tears, her pleas. He had to know the truth. "Who are they from, Emily?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still firm, insistent. "Who wrote you those letters?" She hesitated, her lips trembling, her eyes darting around the room, as if searching for an escape, a way out of this confrontation. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks, tracing wet paths through her makeup. She looked lost, broken, utterly defeated. They're old letters," she stammered finally, her voice choked with emotion. From a long time ago." Another lie. He knew it, she knew it. The dates on the letters were clear, undeniable. Some of them were recent, disturbingly recent. And the diary confirmed everything. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the top letter from the box, the one that started with, "My dearest." He unfolded it, placing it on the table between them, the elegant handwriting stark and accusing in the morning light. He pushed the letter towards her, his eyes fixed on her face, demanding the truth. "Read it, Emily," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "Read it and tell me they're old letters. Tell me they're from a long time ago." She stared at the letter, her eyes fixed on the words, her face pale and drawn. Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring her vision, but she didn't reach up to wipe them away. She just stared at the letter, her body trembling, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He waited, watching her, his heart aching with a mixture of pain and anger. He wanted her to confess, to admit the truth, to finally break down the walls of lies she had built around herself. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know why. Why had she lied to him all these years? Why had she married him if she didn't love him? Why had she kept these letters, these reminders of another man, hidden in their attic, like a secret she couldn't bear to let go of? After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, her voice barely audible above her sobs. They're from Adam, she whispered, the name catching in her throat, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years, perhaps decades. Adam, the A from the diary, the dearest from the letters, the man she had truly loved, the man he had never known about, the man who had cast a long, dark shadow over their entire marriage. He felt a sharp pang of jealousy, a sudden surge of anger, directed at this unknown man, this ghost from Emily's past. But beneath the anger, there was also a strange sense of relief. The truth was finally out. The secret was no longer hidden. The confrontation had reached its climax, and now the resolution could begin. Adam, he repeated, his voice flat, emotionless. Who is Adam? He already knew, of course. The diary had told him everything, but he wanted to hear it from her. He wanted her to say the words, to confess the truth aloud, to acknowledge the pain she had caused him, the lies she had lived. She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen, her face streaked with tears. He was my boyfriend, she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. A long time ago. Before I met you. Another half-truth. He knew from the diary that it was more than just a boyfriend. It was the love of her life, the one who got away, the one she had never forgotten. He pressed her further, his voice relentless, demanding the full truth. "How long ago, Emily?" he asked, his eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing. "And how serious was it?" She flinched at his tone, her body recoiling slightly. She knew he knew. She knew he had read the letters, perhaps even the diary. There was no point in lying anymore. The truth was out, exposed, raw and painful. She took a deep breath, bracing herself, and finally confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush, a torrent of pent-up emotion. It was years ago," she sobbed, her voice breaking. Before college, we were teenagers, high school sweethearts. We were in love, deeply in love. We planned to spend our lives together." She paused, her voice catching in her throat, her tears flowing freely now. But then he moved away, she continued, her voice barely audible. His family moved to another state, and we lost touch. It broke my heart. I thought I would never get over him. She looked up at him, her eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. "I kept the letters," she whispered, her voice filled with shame and regret. I couldn't bear to throw them away. They were all I had left of him. I hid them in the attic years ago when we moved in. I never meant for you to find them." Her confession hung in the air, heavy with sadness and regret. He listened in silence, his heart aching with a mixture of pain and pity. He saw her vulnerability, her brokenness, her deep-seated sorrow. He understood now. He understood why she had kept the letters, why she had married him without love, why she had lived a lie for so many years. She was a wounded woman, haunted by her past, trapped by her memories. And he, John, had been just a convenient escape, a safe harbor in the storm of her broken heart. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Emily's sobs and the ticking of the kitchen clock. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time, perhaps for the first time ever. He saw not the perfect wife he had imagined, but a flawed, vulnerable woman, carrying a heavy burden of grief and regret. He saw the pain in her eyes, the years of suppressed sorrow, the loneliness hidden beneath her cheerful facade. And in that moment, his anger began to subside, replaced by a strange mix of pity and resignation. He couldn't hate her. He couldn't even blame her. She was a victim of circumstance, a prisoner of her own past. And he, in his naive pursuit of perfection, had become entangled in her web of lies, a collateral damage in her lifelong struggle with heartbreak. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his touch gentle, comforting. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise, her tears momentarily meomchwasta. He squeezed her hand, offering her a silent reassurance, a gesture of compassion, not forgiveness. Not yet, but something close to it. "Emily," he said softly, his voice filled with a weariness he had never felt before. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me about Adam? About everything?" She hesitated, her eyes searching his face, trying to gauge his reaction, his true feelings. I was afraid," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. "Afraid of what you would think. afraid of losing you. I knew you wanted perfection. And I wasn't perfect. I was broken. And I tried to hide it. I tried to be the perfect wife you wanted, but I couldn't. Her words hung in the air, heavy with honesty and self-awareness. He listened, absorbing her confession, processing the truth, the painful, devastating truth about their marriage, about their life together. He had thought she was perfect, but perfection was an illusion, a myth, a lie, and he, in his blind pursuit of it, had failed to see the real Emily, the flawed, vulnerable, heartbroken woman who had married him not out of love, but out of fear and a desperate need for healing. And now, the truth was out. The illusion shattered. And they were left with the wreckage of their perfect marriage, the debris of their shattered dreams, and the daunting task of picking up the pieces, if that was even possible. The resolution was upon them, and the future, uncertain and terrifying, stretched out before them, vast and unknown. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, punctuated only by Emily's soft sobs. John held her hand, his touch a fragile bridge across the chasm that had opened up between them. He looked at her, at the woman he had thought he knew, the woman who was now revealed to be a stranger, a wounded soul hidden behind a mask of perfection. He felt a profound sadness, not just for himself, for his shattered dreams and broken heart, but for Emily too, for the years of pain and loneliness she had endured, for the burden of secrets she had carried for so long. He had wanted the truth, and he had gotten it in all its raw, painful honesty. And now, he had to decide what to do with it. He had to make a choice, a difficult, life-altering choice that would determine the course of their future, individually and together. He could walk away. He could leave. He could end their marriage, severing all ties, escaping the pain and betrayal, seeking solace and healing elsewhere. It would be the easiest path, the most logical choice, given the circumstances. He had been lied to, deceived, used. He deserved better. He deserved a love that was real, honest, and true. He deserved a wife who loved him for who he was, not for what he represented, not as a substitute for a lost love. He could pack his bags, walk out the door, and never look back. He could start over, rebuild his life, find someone who truly loved him, someone who saw him, valued him, cherished him for himself. The thought was tempting, alluring, a siren song promising escape from the pain and confusion. But then, he looked at Emily again, at her tear-stained face, her broken expression, her vulnerability laid bare. And he saw not just a liar, a deceiver, a betrayer, but a wounded woman, a soul in pain, desperately in need of compassion and understanding. He saw the years of sorrow etched on her face, the loneliness in her eyes, the deep-seated fear of abandonment that had driven her to build her walls of lies. And he felt a flicker of something else, something unexpected, something that surprised even him. Not love, not anymore, perhaps not ever, but empathy, compassion, a strange, unexpected sense of responsibility. He had stumbled into her secret world, uncovered her hidden pain. And now, he couldn't just walk away, not without trying to understand, to help, to heal, if that was even possible. He squeezed her hand again, his gaze softening, his voice gentler than it had been all morning. "Emily," he said, his voice low and earnest, "what do you want to do?" She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face, trying to decipher his meaning, his intentions. She saw not anger, not judgment, but something else. Something akin to hope, or perhaps just resignation. She wasn't sure. She was lost, confused, adrift in a sea of emotions, unsure of what she wanted, what she needed, what she deserved. I don't know, she whispered finally, her voice choked with emotion. I'm so sorry, John. So sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I messed everything up. Her apology was sincere, heartfelt, raw with remorse. He saw the genuine pain in her eyes, the depth of her regret, and he knew in that moment that she was telling the truth. She had messed up. She had made mistakes. She had lied, deceived, and betrayed him. But she was also human, flawed, and broken. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance, a sliver of hope, for them to salvage something from the wreckage of their marriage. Not the perfect marriage he had imagined, not the fairy tale ending he had dreamed of, but something different, something real, something honest, something based not on illusion but on truth, however painful that truth might be. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "We both did, Emily," he said softly, his voice barely audible. "We both messed up." And in that moment, a new chapter began. A chapter of uncertainty, of pain, but also, perhaps, of unexpected healing. The resolution was not an ending.